And it's Ken Kraetzer for cbsi Services. We're at Lake George, New York today. Beautiful day here for the Executive Bank Symposium of the Independent Bankers Association of New York State. And our keynote speaker today, I'm pleased to be able to talk with Marty Mosby of Stifel. And Marty talked about the economy, how community banks are doing, and the impact of inflation. But Marty started out by saying that community banks are doing better than people think. And why is that so, that community banks are continuing to be leaders in their communities and being also able to be successful financially?
Well, what you're seeing with community banks today is that the bigger banks are having to standardize everything with technology. So the scale that you've heard about forever is really not happening in the way that it was supposed to play out. The community banks can be just as effective, just as profitable. It's really about how they run their community banks, because they can so much better understand their customers, their communities. They know where that loan is going. They know the street it's on. They know the people that they're lending to. And that's a way for them to support their clients and their communities and be very much closer to it than the big banks could ever be.
You talked about kind of a sweet spot in the banking industry for banks between $1 billion and $50 billion being the most profitable, very profitable segment. Why is that? That would be community banks and those a little bit larger.
So what it would really look like is like from $1 billion to $5 billion. That's kind of when you get to that spot. Once you get past 5, get to 10, get beyond 10, you start to get more cost, technology-wise, compliance costs. That's when that kind of kicks in. Actually, the actual spot where a bank can be as productive as they need to be is almost as low as $500 million. So they can be there. We've even seen banks that have been able to operate very effectively in that $200 to $500 million level. So again, community banks can know their customers and clients, can manage their banks much more aware of what's going on, and don't have to rely on technology. They can literally run it themselves. And that's where they can really build a lot of profitability and effectiveness for their customers.
Good. You spoke to the current surge of inflation that the country is experiencing this year, and the impact of the $12 trillion of stimulus funds during COVID. What was the impact? What was the association of the stimulus funds with inflation? And you had some remedies for bringing inflation back to more traditional levels.
Well, what's surprising is that we don't really see the money supply being talked about as much. It used to be a standard, kind of equation. The money supply was what created inflation. When we got in trouble the last time, there was a lot of monetary economists that started coming out of the woodwork saying this is what's causing these issues. So as we're going through this and we're seeing that the money supply exploded when we went through this fiscal stimulus, that's what's causing all the inflation that we're dealing with right now. The good news is that the money supply growth peaked at around 25% last year. It's been slowly coming back down. Traditionally, we've tried to keep it around 5%. We're back to that number now, which means that eventually, if we can keep it here, we'll see inflation starting to kind of roll over in the next 18 months is when we'll start to see that kind of waning, which gives the ability for interest rates to stay relatively low. So as long as the money supply can stay lower and the growth stay lower, we won't see this elevated inflation rate stay stubbornly high like we're dealing with right now.
Absolutely. And you had a great story about a banker that you worked with, a client who was going to do a meeting, and everyone was anxious to see what his key to success was. And he said, and his strategy was to plan for the long term, all the time. Tell us a little bit about the background on that one and why planning for the long term is so important and can really pay off.
Well, the situation was a bank in this area, known very well, M&T Bank. They've had a long track record of performing really well. They had a CEO, it was Mr. Wilmers, who had built this bank and was very well respected. The point is, as you become publicly traded, or even privately owned banks can get enamored with their current performance. And if you get that and you start focusing on that as your ultimate goal, you begin to lose track of the value equations. What am I supposed to do to create value for my customers and for my employees and for the communities that I'm serving? When you focus on those things, you can make good decisions. When you focus on how profitable you are, you typically lose sight of what got you there. And so if you get on that treadmill, it's hard to get off. And if you can look for the long run and look at the value you're creating for those other constituencies, not just your shareholders, you'll end up rewarding your shareholders in the long run.
And final thought was a story you told about community bankers, about how much they care, how much they care about their customers, their stockholders, and how personal the business is to them. Why is that so?
Well, again, the bigger banks are losing contact with the customers. If you look at what's happening in their branches, tellers and CSRs are data entry folks. You can go online and do it, or you can do it in the branch. The branch folks are just helping you get the data into the same system. They're not making the decision. When you have community banks focused on the people, focused on the businesses, focused on the communities, they can make right decisions with the understanding of how it's going to impact all those things. Computers just aren't that smart yet. So the ability to be close to your customer distinguishes community banks, and that's why they're gaining market share consistently year after year.
Marty, just tell us a little bit about your career and Stifel, your new company.
Well, I started at First Tennessee Bank. That was back in the late 1980s as the economist, and then I began to do the balance sheet management, so I became chairperson of ALCO. Then I ran strategies, investor relations. Eventually, I became CFO of First Horizon Bank. If you think about, Stifel, I came back here to work in Memphis, Tennessee with Vining Sparks. We just got acquired 6 months ago by Stifel, the combination of which we believe brings a real powerful combination of value for our clients in the community banking world. So we've got a lot of products that we get from the Stifel side. We've got the relationship focus and the advice that we bring from the Vining side. And I think the combination will be something that community banks will see the value of for years to come.
Marty Mosby from Stifel, great to see you here at Lake George at the Independent Bankers Association of New York State meeting. Good to meet you.
Thanks for having me.
Our pledge is Ken Kraetzer for CBSI Services.